Thanks for joining us for this camera webinar. My name is Alex Safian. I'm an Associate Director and Research Director of Camera. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. I am, if I'm not mistaken, sharing with you a PowerPoint. Can you all see that? It says the
Not yet.
Blitz. Oh, you cannot.
Not yet.
Well, that is not good because I need to be sharing my screen with you. I apologize. 1 second here. And then let me see. I thought I was sharing it. Let's see if I do it now. Am I sharing it with you now?
Looks good, yes.
Oh, good. Fantastic. Okay. I apologize for this slight. Now I got to get it to, there we go. And can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I put together some slides on this, Alex, and I basically have for you guys today some very, very good news, which is that Israel is winning the war. And I know after a long slog in Gaza, we were, a lot of us were getting kind of gloomy about it all. But I think there's really great reason for optimism, and I'd like to explain to you why today. And I'm calling this the Blitz. In the last couple of months, Israel has diminished Hisbahs to a shocking extent. When I think of Hisbahs today, I think of these old cartoon characters who used to run out over the cliff, and they're hanging, with no ground underneath them, and their legs are still moving. That is Hisbahs today. I don't think the people in Hisbahs, I don't think their masters in Tehran understand the extent to which there's no ground underneath them. The Israelis decapitated them and managed to really change the balance of power with not just with Hezbollah, but with Iran. Here yesterday, or day before yesterday, the Secretary of Defense, the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, said the following. This is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close to the quote. He said, "Hezbollah is a broken organization without command and control capabilities, without significant fire capabilities, and above all, without leadership. It has no ability to make decisions. Its capabilities are comparable to those of Hamas at the beginning of the war. Iran has lost its most valuable asset." So how did we get here? That's the first question that I want to. First of all, I think that this statement from Yoav Gallant is a more accurate description of what's happened in the last couple of months than what we're getting from a lot of the media analyses that we're reading. Okay. This story of the decapitation and severe diminishment of Hezbollah begins with the ballistic missile barrage, or the barrage of drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles that the Iranians shot against Israel on April 13th. From the Israeli point of view, Alex, this was a low point in the war because two of the biggest challenges that Israel faced came together at the same time to reinforce one another. And the two challenges are, number one, Iran's disruptive military capabilities. That's the drones, the ballistic missiles, the cruise missiles, the anti-tank guided missiles, and so on. These are extremely hard to suppress. And when used cleverly, as the Iranians do, they are capable of penetrating Israeli defenses, which are the finest in the world. Even a failed, quote unquote, failed attack like the one on April 13th is very costly to Israel in a number of ways, starting with economics. The defense economics just don't work because it's so much cheaper for Iran to throw these things at Israel than it is for Israel to shoot them down. But there are many other ways in which it's bad for Israel, some of which I'll discuss in a minute. The second challenge that the Israelis have is American pressure. The Americans from moment one have defined this war as a Palestinian-Israeli war, as a Hamas-Israel war. And they have seen the solution to the war as a ceasefire in Gaza. But this is objectively, this is a mischaracterization of the war. The Hezbollah opened up against Israel the day after Hamas did. The Houthis came in shortly after that. The militias in Iraq and Syria shortly after that. They have attacked not just Israel, but also the United States. This is, at its very least, this is an Iranian-Israeli war. I actually think it's an Iranian war against the American alliance system, that it's an asymmetric conflict that the Iranians are launching, and they're trying to hive away Israel, America's most valuable asset in its alliance system, from Washington. But the administration doesn't see it that way, and as part of its de-escalation strategy, it's get a ceasefire in Gaza strategy, it has effectively put a shield of immunity over Iran. Israel is not allowed, or is strongly discouraged from attacking Iran. And that means that American policy becomes a kind of wall that the Iranians can hide behind. They can pop up, shoot their ballistic missiles, and then hide behind the wall again. So the Israelis, the net effect for the Israelis as a result of that April 13th barrage and the American pressure on Israel not to respond to it, was to erode Israeli deterrence, and in particular to hand escalation dominance to the Iranians. So I think we should look at everything that's happened since April 13th, all of the Israeli policies since April 13th, as a very clever, concerted, dedicated effort to reestablish escalation dominance over the Iranians. And I just, here on this slide, I've just listed a number of things that they have engaged in since that time: targeted assassinations, the exploding pagers, the Operation Grim Beeper, the decapitation of the Radwan force, attacks in the Dakhia, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Lebanon. Remember, when this war began, for Israel to attack in Beirut, in the Dakhia, that was a red line of the Americans. The Americans were strongly pressing the Israelis not to do that, but it was also a presumed red line of Hisbahs and Iran, and that if Israel did that, there would be a combined attack. The nightmare scenario was a combined attack from Iran and from Hisbahs simultaneously that would totally overwhelm Israeli defenses. We thought of the Hisbahs as having 150,000 rockets and missiles, some significant portion of which were precision guided, capable of hitting any site in Israel, all of Israel's critical national infrastructure. And we thought of this as being that this was going to be a horrendous war. Certainly I did. Well, look, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Israel was able to decapitate Hisbahs, to degrade it, and to prevent it from having from using those kind of capabilities in a way that I don't think anyone saw coming. This has drastically changed the balance of power in the Middle East in a very short period of time. Hisbahs was the shield of Iran. This is the shield of the Iranian nuclear program. The most potent warfighting capabilities that Israel faced in the Middle East were not from Iran, but from Hisbahs. They don't exist anymore. It's an amazing development. So the Iranian response to this was to carry out the October 1, the second barrage of ballistic missiles. And there are a few things I want to highlight about this. Number one, they penetrated Israeli defenses. The Israelis are making light of it, or playing it down, saying that no warfighting capabilities were harmed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's worrisome. Even if we just look at the Nevatim air base alone, it was hit some 20 or 30 times. No damage to any serious capabilities of the Israelis. But having your adversary able to hit, this is the base where the Israelis keep the F-35s, having their adversary able to hit that at will is very troubling. It's also troubling because it demonstrated a serious learning curve. In the April 13th barrage, the Iranians put together the drones, the ballistic missiles, and the cruise missiles in combined strike packages. This time, they recognized two things. They learned something about Israeli defenses from the last time around, and they also learned something about their own the limits of their own capabilities. and they adjusted because they are an intelligent adversary. So Israel has a multi-tiered defense system. And what the Iranians did in this attack on October 1 was they decided to stress only one tier. So by using only ballistic missiles, these solid fuel ballistic missiles, they engaged only one element of the Israeli defense system, but they overwhelmed it. Now, the other thing that's very worrisome, or two other things that are worrisome if you're looking at this from an Israeli point of view, from the point of view of Israeli decision makers, one is the routinization of these massive ballistic missile barrages against Israel. This should be seen by the world as an outrageous act, as a dangerous act, as something that needs to be prevented. But instead, the world has kind of taken it with a ho-hum attitude, and the Americans have said, well, why don't you just absorb it, because nobody was hurt. But as we see, there's dangers to doing nothing, because the adversary learns, becomes a bigger danger, and he becomes more emboldened by this. Finally, these ballistic missiles that were fired at Israel on October 1, all of them could carry a nuclear warhead. Iran is weeks away from having enough fissile material to build some 5 nuclear weapons. It's months away from having a warhead that it could put on these ballistic missiles. If it were to put 5 nuclear warheads on ballistic missiles, and those were to be shot in a barrage of 100 or 200 ballistic missiles, the Israelis would not be able to know which of those ballistic missiles have nuclear warheads and which don't. One of them could get through, could do untold damage to Israel. I'm not saying that we're on the verge of nuclear war, but if you're a military planner, if you're leading the country in Israel, you have to take this very seriously. This is a really serious threat, unlike anything that Israel has ever faced before. So another part of the threat that is so disturbing, if you're looking at this from Jerusalem, is the role of the United States in all of this. The Iranian strategy is based on activating Washington, on convincing Washington to put Israel in a bear hug and to restrain it. And unfortunately, the Iran policy is working to a significant degree. Well, the Iranians are doing a number of things to sort of light a fire under the Americans to go restrain the Israelis. They're threatening to attack Saudi Arabia and the UAE. They're threatening to hit Israeli critical national infrastructure, including the Dimona nuclear reactor. They're threatening to develop a nuclear weapon. There are openly calls now in the Iranian political system for a weapon. We're all old enough here to remember when there was a fatwa supposedly against Muslims building a nuclear weapon, but apparently now people in Iran are no longer fearful of violating the tenets of Islam as interpreted by the Ayatollah Khamenei, supposedly. And finally, the Iranians are threatening to attack. They are actually attacking Americans. Attacks on our bases in Syria and Iraq are up many times since October 1. That's a threat to the United States. Constrain the message from Tehran to Washington is constrain your Israelis or else. So what we see is it's working. The Biden administration is doing its best to string out the Israelis, negotiate with them, putting down red lines. Don't attack nuclear sites. Don't attack oil, energy infrastructure, make it proportional, your response. I don't know even what that word means, but that's what President Biden said publicly. There was this amazing exchange that came out in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, which I have paraphrased here. Yoav Gallant was talking to the Secretary of Defense, Austin, and he told him, we just killed Nasrallah. And Austin said, excuse me? What did you say? And Gallant said, we just killed Nasrallah. Austin then called him back later that day and said, so you are, since you're not going to consult with us before you go do these provocative things like killing Nasrallah, are you prepared to go it alone? In other words, threatening Israel that if it continues to ignore American red lines, it will not be supported by the United States. in this war. The United States is now negotiating over the heads of the Israelis, it's activated its Saudi allies and others in the Gulf, I think, and it's trying to negotiate with the Iranians a comprehensive ceasefire agreement in order to stop the war before the Israelis attack. But it's also a way of trying to water down the Israeli attack. It's part of an argument to say to the Israelis, we've got this great negotiation going on, don't disrupt it right now, and so on. And all of this, unfortunately, I think just emboldens the Iranians. So what is Israel going to do? And I'll talk about Lebanon, and then I'll talk about Iran. Lebanon, something happened yesterday in Israel, and I don't know if you guys were following it. It's actually, it didn't get very well reported. It was reported, but not very well, and I don't think the full significance was brought out. I think it's actually very significant for understanding the political context, the domestic political context in which the Israelis are operating in Lebanon. So on the left here is a map. How do I activate this? Maybe if I just go like that. No. That's the tunnel. Well, I'll show you. On the right, you see the tunnel. This is a tunnel that goes under the Israeli border from Lebanon, under the Israeli border, and it comes up on the Israeli side, there where that red arrow is. There is no opening into Israel, but if you were to dig a few feet up, you're in Israel. And the IDF discovered this tunnel. I was trying to show it to you on the right here. Let's see if I can get this. The left. I can't get the video on the left to activate. I don't know why. But okay, forget it. It just shows you where it is on the border on the map on the left. Now, yesterday, the Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesman, called a surprise press briefing in the evening. And everyone kind of little bit of a shock went through the Israelis because they thought he was going to announce something about the coming attack on Iran. But it wasn't. It was all about this tunnel. And the reason is the IDF has lost legitimacy among the displaced Israelis in the north. There's great disbelief about what the IDF tells them. And this tunnel activated the most neurotic fears of those displaced people. Then when I say displaced people, we're talking about 80 to 100,000 people who have had to leave their homes for fear of being rocketed by Hisbahs, droned by Hisbahs, but also fearful that Hisbahs is going to carry out in the north a kind of October 7th attack across the border into Israel. And that's what this tunnel plays on. The people in the north think two things. Number one, they're struck at the fact that the IDF said it didn't know that this tunnel existed and they just discovered it. So they wonder, well, how many other tunnels are there that you haven't discovered? And the second thing that they're thinking is that the IDF knows about a lot of these tunnels and it's not talking about it and not telling them. And so there's this lack of legitimacy that the IDF has, and it has to regain it, and it's very much aware that it has to regain it, and that I think is going to propel the IDF forward in Lebanon to continue the attack on Hezbollah. Channel 14, that's the Fox News of Israel, yesterday reported that the Israeli leadership has tightened up their war demands, and they have transmitted them to the Americans, and they want the complete dismantlement of Hezbollah as a militia. Now, I hope they stick to that. But what my point here is that this is not just a position that the Israeli leaders can take because they think it's a clever thing to do. They're under enormous domestic political pressure to do this. So I expect this war in Lebanon to continue for a long time to come. And the slide here, I'll just run through this very quickly. A lot of you have probably seen this. This is the Iran garden in Maroun Aras, which is just across from Avivim. This is called the Iran Garden because it was set up it was paid for by the Iranians. And it's a little Disneyland of anti-Zionism. You go there with your kids and you stand on this hilltop and you look over at the Israeli Moshav of Avivim. And there in the middle, you see there's a big picture of Qasem Soleimani, the former head of the Quds Force, pointing the way to Jerusalem through Avivim. And then on the left, you see that the Golden Dome structure it's no longer there, thank God, but it was a replica of the Dome of the Rock. So this is a little, jihad Disneyland where you go and you talk about we're gonna go take Jerusalem through Israel. And here on the right is a little video I'll play you that the soldiers destroying the Israeli soldiers destroying the is it playing? It's not playing, is it? I haven't mastered the videos inside the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to move forward. Trust me, it's Israeli soldiers planting the Israeli flag and showing that the Iran Garden is no more. Goodbye. And I predict it will not be coming back. Okay, so what is Israel going to do in Iran? And with this, Alex, I'll finish my comments here. Like I said, they're under pressure from the Americans not to hit nuclear sites, not to hit energy sites. What do they want? They want to deter Iran. They want to reestablish escalation dominance. And so they need to do that while being mindful of the American red lines. They're so dependent on the Americans in so many ways that they don't want to completely flout and anger the Americans needlessly, but they also have to show the Iranians that the Iranian strategy of hiding behind the Americans, of activating the Americans to shut the Israelis down, will not work. That if they attack Israel with impunity, they're gonna get attacked back and they're gonna lose things that are valuable to them. So I expect I developed a few months ago, I started talking about, as I watched the Israelis negotiate these pressures from the Americans, I started talking about high signature, low signature, high impact, low impact. I think it's a useful way of thinking about what they're going to do. High signature means it gets a lot of visibility. Low signature means it doesn't get a lot of visibility. High impact means it really sends a message to the leadership in Tehran or Damascus or wherever, Beirut, that they are going to lose something they hold dear. The Israelis will take it away from them. And low impact is that it doesn't really send that kind of message of seriousness. You can have high signature, low impact. You can have high signature, high impact, and vice versa. The Israelis are going to go for high signature, high impact in the ways that they hit military bases, stockpiles of ballistic missiles, and air defense systems. They're going to think like just pure military thinking. They're going to be aware that there may be an Iranian counterattack from this attack, and then Israel's going to have to hit them again. So they're going to want to degrade. They're going to want to destroy their air defenses completely in order to send a message to Iran that it's completely naked before Israel, but also to make it easier for Israel, if Israel has to go back in again, to go in and without fear of losing any F-35s or anything else. They want to hit the Iranian military. By that I mean the IRGC, and they want to hit it hard, and they want it to be seen to be hit, and they want to take out the stockpiles, because that's the real threat to Israel. Other than the nuclear threat, the real threat are these ballistic missiles. But then I think they're going to do something else, Alex. They're going to go for low signature, high impact. And this is where they're going to step across some of these American red lines. And what they're going to do, they're going to look for, the Prime Minister Netanyahu and Herzl Halevi and the Chief of Staff and the Minister of Defense, they're going to say to the military, to the intel people, give me some secret nuclear sites that we can hit, that the Iranians will not admit that we hit, but they will understand that we hit it, and they will understand what that means. So we'll cross the American red line, but we'll do it in such a way that it doesn't publicly flout the Americans. And that's what I expect to see. I expect to see there are going to be some places that the Israelis are going to hit and no one's going to talk about it. But what we're going to find out is it was this research facility, that research facility for nuclear weapons. And with that, I'll stop there, Alex, and we can have a discussion.
Great. Thank you, Mike. That was fascinating and insightful as usual. Let me start by asking you, when you talk about sites that Israel will hit, I would also look, I mean, you mentioned military bases, but I would look more specifically for elements of regime control, meaning, as you said, IRGC. I would stay away from the Iranian military, which is separate from the IRGC, but also the Basijis. They have bases in the cities, and those are the black-clad guys on motorcycles that terrorize the population during riots and demonstrations. And I think it would send a great message to the people and to the leadership if Israel took out those bases. Now, I don't know if I don't know if there's anybody at the IRGC bases right now, or if they've evacuated, and the same thing for the Basijis. But even if they're not there, taking out the bases has an impact on command and control, et cetera. And the people of Iran the people in Tehran know where the Basiji bases are. And if they see Israel hitting them, I think that would be a great encouragement to the enemies within for the regime. So I would add that, and the intelligence also. Go after SEPA, go after the intelligence facilities as well. One thing I wanted to ask you is there's another organization in Washington that is going to do a presentation in the next day or two in favor of a defense treaty between the United States and Israel. And the reason it comes to mind is because you mentioned earlier a bear hug. Personally, I'm worried about a defense treaty because I think it is a bear hug that removes Israel's ability to act independently. Where do you stand on that? Do you think overall a defense treaty is a good thing or a bad thing?
How about at this point, I am agnostic because I haven't thought enough about it. I'm embarrassed to say. I would have to. I think the devil would be in the details, and I don't know I don't know the details. I will just say that I am very much concerned about the bear hug, about the ability of the United States has so many levers now over the Israeli military. The Israeli military is stronger than it's been at any time in its history. And yet it has some remarkable weaknesses, or let's say, it has some muscles that it's developed that are just incredible, like we've seen what it's done against Hisbahs in the last couple of months. But then it has some weaknesses, like the inability to have any forces ready to attack a ragtag army of Gazan terrorists that came out on October 7th. So, but one of the surprising weaknesses is that it is the dependence on the United States for basic ammunition, which the United States is still using against the Israelis. So I don't with regard to I'm going to stay agnostic on the specifics of the defense treaty. But they definitely have to develop their supply chains and defense industrial base so that they can have operational sovereignty, for an extended conflict. I don't know exactly what that means, but I can understand the principle. With regard to your earlier point, another thing that the Israelis might do is send, again, this would cross an American red line, I think. Not one that has been explicit, but it would cross the principle of proportionality, I think, that President Biden enunciated, is take actions toward decapitation of the regime, which is sort of pushing in the same direction that you are with your idea of attacking besieged bases. 2 months ago, I would not have said that. I wouldn't have even thought of this because I would not have been able to imagine that Israel had the capabilities to decapitate the Iranian regime. But after seeing what they did to Hisbahs, I have to ask, maybe they do. We're going to have to wait and see. But after what they did to Hania in Tehran, and after what they've done to Hisbahs, they may have some rabbits to pull out of their hat in Iran. And it wouldn't surprise me it would surprise me if they actually went for decapitation. Let's posit that they actually have the ability. And I don't know that they do, but let's posit it. Uh, Even if they did have the ability, it would surprise me if they would go for it because of the how much that would traumatize the Americans if they did that. But what they might do is do a little feint toward it. You know, take out one or two guys who maybe second tier guys, but people who are very important in the drone and missile think there would be sort of, it wouldn't be low signature high impact, but it would be sort of medium signature, very high impact if the Iranians saw that the Israelis could reach in like that. Yesterday, Yoav Gallant said that Israel's attack on Iran was coming. It was going to be katlani, well, deadly, and it was going to be deadly something and a surprise. I forgot and surprising, and they're not going to know. They're not going to know where it came from, and they're not going to know how they were how they were hit, but they're going to understand what they lost. We'll see. We'll see.
When Hezbollah was about to launch a major missile strike on Israel, I don't know, was it 10 days ago? Israel preempted in order to prevent that. Israel so far has not preempted the Iranian strikes, despite the fact that they clearly were announcing that they were upcoming in both cases. Do you think the next time, maybe after Israel launches, that they may then try to preempt any Iranian response rather than sit there and play defense?
I do.
Israel has, Jericho missiles that are very, very accurate and multi-purpose. They can carry conventional weapons, not just nuclear weapons. It might send a good message to Iran to show that the Israeli weapons are both accurate, effective, and that the Iranians can do nothing about it. Do you think the Israelis might just try to stop the next attack in its tracks?
I do. I don't know. I don't know enough about military capabilities to understand whether the distances allow what they allow with regard to preemption. I don't even know what how this is done. And so on. But if the Israelis have that capability, I think the number of times that they're going to allow themselves to sit back and just wait until they get hit with the ballistic missiles is going to decrease with time.
How important do you think it is that yesterday or 2 days ago, Hezbollah actually was talking about asking for a ceasefire, something I don't think they've ever done before?
I didn't. I interpreted that statement by Naim Qassem a little differently. You know what it was a little bit more ambiguous than the way it was presented. He said, we're supportive of the efforts of Nabi Berri to get a ceasefire. So Hezbollah would like to have Israel stop firing right now. This is not going to happen. So I don't know how serious that was, but look, they're hurting. They're hurting really badly. But one of the things I will say, they're hurting worse than they even know they're hurting. Because I gave the image, the image of the cartoon character over the cliff, but it's a cartoon character without a head over the cliff. Their ability. Naim Qassem is the deputy commander of of deputy secretary general of Hezbollah. The reason he is alive is because if the Israelis haven't killed him, is because he's a complete non-entity, not plugged into anything. He doesn't matter. He's a glorified spokesman, press spokesman. So I don't think anything that he says is particularly authoritative. I don't think they can be particularly authoritative right now because nobody's in charge.
You had mentioned about the Iranians perhaps having the capability for putting nuclear weapons on their rockets, which are missiles, which are actually, they have been designed to carry nuclear weapons, copying North Korean designs. But I'm wondering if there's any recent intelligence you're aware of on that subject. Making compact nuclear weapons is technically difficult, especially without testing them.
I don't know. On these matters, I am not I'm not a technical expert. So I just repeat what people like David Albright and Ali Hainonen say, and I know them to be internationally respected, sober analysts who really understand these things. So I just kind of parrot their I make my assessments on the basis of what people like that say.
No, it makes sense. But Albright has said that he thinks that
Oh, I saw Ali Hainonen say it.
okay.
I haven't checked in to see what David has said
Okay,
about this
well,
lately.
both are obviously, as you say, very, very credible on the subject. Um, the last thing that I'm going to ask you about before we go to questions is Israel, actually two things. Israel had a policy which was very short-sighted with regard to Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, and that was quiet for quiet. That if Hamas didn't attack Israel, Israel would not attack Hamas, even if Israel saw preparations for war, building of tunnels. They would not bomb warehouses, factories, underground, etc. They would bomb convoys going towards Gaza in other countries, but they wouldn't touch them unless, fighting started. They did nothing to preempt Hamas, unlike their actions in the West Bank, where they're acting every day and every night to keep Hamas down and prevent terrorist attacks. Same thing was true with Hezbollah, and of course, the same thing was true with Iran. Do you think that this is the absolute end of the quiet for quiet policy in all of those arenas?
I think so, yes. You know, I learned something shortly after the war began from someone in the IDF told me, and I didn't know this beforehand, which is that prior to October 8th, Israel had the IDF had rules of engagement, very, very strict rules of engagement, not to kill a Hezbollah fighter anywhere, including in Syria. And so if they were, they did on occasion kill Hezbollah guys when they were going after Iranians in Syria. They would occasionally kill a Hezbollah guy by mistake. If they saw a car with the Iranians in it that they wanted to kill, and they knew there was a Hezbollah guy in there, they wouldn't take the shot. And after a while, the Syrians, the Iranians and Hezbollah started to notice this, and they started to move critical facilities from Syria to Lebanon because they knew they were protected in Lebanon, which I thought was kind of fascinating. When I learned this, I thought, like you said, that this was a terrible, terrible mistake. It probably was a mistake, but I think it probably also fed in to the mindset in Hezbollah and Iran that allowed the Israelis to pull off this incredible Operation Grim Reaper, where they felt that they were. I think that they felt that they were acting with impunity. They felt Israel was deterred. They felt that they were the Hezbollah I'm talking about. They felt that they were stronger than they actually were, and it set them up for an even bigger fall. But in general, as a general statement, I think, yes, this is the end of it. Clearly, I think what the IDF is doing in Gaza, in southern Lebanon, is it is I wanted to say the word habituate. I can't find that. When you make get somebody used to doing something, the first time I walk into your house without knocking, you're shocked. But if I just keep doing it every day, you get used to me walking in and out. What have I done? What have I done to you? I've made you anyway, this is what the Israelis are doing. They're making the Americans and the international community, getting them used to the idea that the IDF is going to roll into Gaza whenever it wants to, in order to take out concentrations of power by Hezbollah that it finds threatening. I don't see Hezbollah ever coming back to what it was from where it is now. The Israelis now understand. Everyone from every taxi driver up to every general understands the seriousness of the threat. that was allowed to develop there, and they're not going to let it happen again.
Hezbollah has a lot of enemies within Lebanon. They've stepped on a lot of toes, killed a lot of people. They've acted with impunity against Christians, against Sunnis, and against other Shia groups, including, you mentioned Nabi Berri. They've acted against Amal as well. For them to turn to Amal and Nabi Berri is kind of interesting, but there's a term in the Middle East called open accounts, meaning you killed a bunch of ours and we haven't hit you back yet, but we have not forgotten. And that can be 20, 30 years later when the opportunity arises, they get even. So Hezbollah seems to me, and I'd like to know what you think of this, is in a very difficult situation. To the extent that they're forced to disarm, they open themselves up to retaliation from their enemies within.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm sure that lots of people are fantasizing about the day that they can take Hezbollah down a notch or two. But when I was in the White House in 2006, 2007, I developed a principle of good strategy, and that is that if your strategy ends with the line that says, "and then the Lebanese will step up
Yeah.
and do X, Y, and Z," then you have a very bad strategy. Maybe, maybe not, but I think the IDF should not plan on the people of Lebanon doing their work for them.
Yeah, as the IDF referred to them back in the good old days of the 80s, perfumed soldiers who were not actually willing to do anything. We have a question from our friend Warren Kozak, who I think you also know, Mike, and he's asking about something you've actually written about, but it'll be nice to have you give a short preface of it. Have you been able to figure out why Obama and then Biden continue to appease Iran? Do you have a theory as to what was behind this?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Warren. Well, anyway, great to hear from you, Warren. And I think that we need to be aware that they are extremely proud of this policy, and they remain proud of it. I think we can see it pretty clearly now with the pressure that they put on Israel not to attack Iran, that Iran is off limits. You can analyze it in one of three different ways. You can say it is a strategy which says that in the past, Israel and Saudi Arabia to a lesser extent, but really Israel was forcing the United States into a conflict with Iran that was not in the American interest. Yes, Iran is a hostile power to the United States. Yes, we have lots of areas where we're going to have friction with them. But so the thinking goes, there are lots of areas where we have common interests. And unfortunately, the Israeli paranoia about Iran is forcing the United States to take a much more aggressive position on Iran than is good for the United States or Israel. Because what we really should do is play a kind of role as a mediator between the two. Obviously, we're much more attached to Israel than we are to Iran. Iran's never going to be an ally, but we can work to protect Israel from the worst depredations of Iran, while also moderating the Iranians by keeping some distance from Iran. It's also domestic American politics. This is progressive. This is a progressive foreign policy. The progressives. If you see the Middle East in this way, where the problem is Israel, the problem is Netanyahu, the problem is the settlers, the problem is the aggressive Israeli defense policies and so on. If you see it that way, then the people in the United States, like myself, like you, Warren, evangelical Christians, conservative, or let's say security-minded Republicans, they are the party of war. They're the ones who are causing the conflict in the Middle East. It doesn't mean that Iran is the party of peace, but it's the object of diplomacy, where all of the peace-loving people, they put their focus on talking to the Iranians. And if you see the world that way, then it has the effect of turning all the people in the domestic American political scene, whom the progressives in any case hate, it turns them into the demons of the story in the Middle East. So the domestic politics and the foreign policy strategy reinforce one another. And finally, and I won't spend any time talking about this, this is religion, actually. This is Protestant modernism. I've written a bit on this. I'm not going to talk about it here now because this will take us down a big rabbit hole. But Protestant modernism has a foreign policy, and it doesn't like Zionism.
Hey, here's an interesting question. Who in the Biden administration is leading Iran policy, and does Robert Malley still have influence, at least through the people that he secreted into the bureaucracy, even though he probably doesn't have any influence himself right now?
I don't think Rob Malley has any influence, but I have never. Tony Badran and I wrote an article called "The Realignment in Tablet" at the beginning of the Biden administration, and we took direct aim at the people in the pro-Israel community who were saying that, Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, they're the moderates and they think like us, and they're friends of Israel. But Rob Malley, he's the friend of Iran, and there's this difference in opinion between them. And I don't buy it for a second. They all think the same thing. Every one of them. Every one of them. Biden, Kamala Harris, Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk, all of them, Tony Blinken, they all think that engaging Iran diplomatically is the best way to stabilize the Middle East. They still think it. They're very proud of it. When they hear people like us talking like this, they roll their eyes and they think that we're very silly little boys who play war games.
If President Trump wins the elections, how do you think that changes the situation in the Middle East? How do you think that changes Israeli policies?
So I think that the most interesting moment with respect to the election is really between now and the election. And that's because we have a lame duck. No one's in charge. Lame duck president in Joe Biden. He's not really in charge. And Kamala Harris is not an empowered vice president. So this is what's giving, this is why Netanyahu went for the Blitz now. The Blitz starts, he comes to Washington for his speech in Congress. He talks to people, he realizes nobody's in charge. The people giving me these red lines are people like Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken who can't enforce it. And so I can go for it. And I think that's a key part of the decision to go for the Blitz. If he's going to try to pocket as many wins against Hisbahs and to a certain extent Iran as he can before the election, because if Kamala wins, then she's very much an empowered vice president, because this is the beginning of her term as president starts on November 6th. And then she will, and Netanyahu is not going to want to start off the relations with her. She could be in there for 8 years. So he's not going to want to start the relations with her on a completely sour note. There's going to be a lot of friction for sure, but it's not on a completely sour note. If Trump wins, so he's going to try to get as much as he can between now and then. If Trump wins, there's going to be more room for erasing red lines, let's say, and it'll be very, very interesting. But Trump himself might send a message. You don't know what message he's going to send between. He doesn't want to inherit a total mess in the Middle East. So what is Trump going to say? Go for it, Bibi, or is he going to say, hold on, go slow, wait till I get in? In which case, also Netanyahu is going to be mindful of what Trump says, because he's not going to want to restart the relationship with him on a really sour note.
So as the saying goes, better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, which I think is something that the IDF is doing now. Here's an interesting question. Do you think that one of the reasons Israel doesn't want to share advance info with the U.S. is that they believe that Iranian intelligence has penetrated the U.S. military or the administration? I'll add to that. Or is there the belief that the U.S. on its own will leak information about Israeli strikes in order to stop them from happening?
I think it's the latter. I think they fear, first of all, if they share what they're going to do with the Americans will do all kinds of things to foil it, including leaking information to the Iranians. They've done it many times, and they leak stuff publicly. They've done it with their own strikes as well. The Americans, after the Iranians, through their proxies, killed 3 Americans in Jordan. You remember there was this big windup. We had this big where Jake Sullivan kept coming out and saying, we're getting our fist ready. We're going to hit him. We're going to hit him. That was a way of telling the Iranians that of telegraphing what kind of strike it was going to be, and it was a way of saying, get your guys away from here, get your guys away from there, and so on.
Speaking of Israeli strikes against Iran, it's interesting to raise the question of Azerbaijan. And do you think it's come to the point where Azerbaijan would be willing to help Israel, either host Israeli assets in a strike on Iran, or is it we're not quite at that level yet?
No, we're not at that level. As Azerbaijan, great ally of Israel. Israel is still, Turkey there's a trade embargo, but oil from Azerbaijan still flows through Turkey to come to Israel. Azerbaijan did a number of great things for Israel during this war, things that I have been told about but asked not to talk about them publicly, things that really serious help to Israel in time of war. It deserves to be. Anybody who supports Israel needs to know Azerbaijan is a great ally of Israel. But Azerbaijan's number one ally is Turkey. It's not going to get involved with Israel in making war against Iran without having the Turks on board. There's no way the Turks are going to be in favor of that. Azerbaijan's the only country in the world that borders both Russia and Iran. It's very much aware. Its history has taught it that it can be crushed in a second by those two powers if it behaves unwisely. So I think it can be relied on to be very helpful to Israel, but it will not be carrying out joint military operations with the Israelis. All that stuff in the past about the Israelis planning to work together with the Azerbaijanis, those were CIA leaks designed to be a shot over the bow of anyone in the world who might be thinking of working with the Israelis against the Iranians. It wasn't really a serious discussion of what the Israelis and the Azerbaijanis are talking about.
What do you see as the end game? And I think this might be our last question or two. What do you see as the end game in Gaza? I assume that no matter what Israel does, there will still be something called Hamas in Gaza. There will still be some rocket attacks against Israel, maybe of the sort that we saw back when Hamas started doing this many years ago.
I think we had one today. There was a rocket attack if I'm not mistaken, a rocket attack from Gaza.
There was one there was a few days ago from the north. I don't know. What was today's from?
The ones, the couple of days ago in commemoration of October 7th, they commemorated with 3 or 5 rockets out of the north. Today's, I don't know. I just saw a headline. I didn't read it.
So how do you see that? Did you see that's what the end game is going to be? Do you think Israel's going to have troops in Gaza, the Netzarim line, the Philadelphia corridor? What do you think?
I think that the Israelis are going to have overall security control of the Gaza Strip, which means like they want the Gaza Strip to be like what the West Bank is now. They stay out of it. They stay out of the population centers, except when they see some kind of threat developing, and then they go in, and the Netzarim corridor and the Philadelphia corridor, and then there's another one which they don't talk about, but if you look at the map, sort of northwest Gaza Strip down the coastline, they have pretty much a straight shot right down to Gaza City. They can just zip right down the coastline. They're not holding it quite in the same way that they are the Netzarim corridor, but it's a similar kind of thing. They're going to keep that forever. That's what it's going to be. And how they're going to, at some point, they're going to come up with some idea to try to separate. Right now, Hamas still distributes all the aid. So Hamas has its hand on the throat of every Gazan because they can't eat without bowing down before Hamas. The Israelis are going to try to figure out something to try to weaken Hamas's political control in that way. I don't know what that plan will be. It'll come sooner or later, but the real thing is they just want to maintain security control, because then they can tell the population in the south of Israel that that they're safe.
Final question regards Egypt and Egypt's role in this, including before October 7th. Recently, the IDF has said that there were no active tunnels under the border between Gaza and Egypt. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe they're covering for Egypt, but there had to have been smuggling between Egypt and Gaza. And I don't know if it was through Sinai or directly through the Philadelphia corridor. How do you see that? Has Egypt been playing a double game? Is al-Sisi playing a double game? Is the Egyptian army smuggling on its own the way it did actually before 1967? How do you see Egypt's role in this? What their goals were before October 7th and today?
So number one, we talk about the smuggling. Number one issue is that Egypt, if we look at where Egypt was in the 1950s and where it is today, its status in the international system has declined precipitously, and or maybe gradually, but inexorably. You know, the centers of the Arab world today are in the Gulf, and the Egyptians are basically supplicants to the Gulf, and they don't have any power that they can project anywhere. The one international issue where they have real status is the whole Gaza question. And they want to be the primary intermediary with Hamas. And so in order to establish that relationship with Hamas, they have to regulate the flow of goods back and forth. So I would see that smuggling as number one, the way in which Egypt maintains some kind of relationship with Hamas. Of course, Hamas is also an important domestic a factor in Egyptian domestic politics, because it's a Muslim brotherhood. So they want to have a relationship. It doesn't mean they love it or even support it, but they're going to do things to have this connection with it. Secondly, there is just but I don't believe a single thing goes through those tunnels that Egyptian intelligence is unaware of. I just don't believe that. The second thing is I'm sure there's a profit motive among some of the commanders. That would not surprise me in the least. And finally, there's you know, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on this, but it's there. The Egyptians don't like the fact that the Israelis defeated them in so many wars. It gives them you know, they're not out to destroy Israel, but when they see the Jews bleed, it gives them a little bit of pleasure. So there's some kind of fun involved in just keeping the resistance alive, even though they are definitely not part of the resistance axis. A little vicarious thrill, maybe, is a way to put it. I don't get too I don't like all the people target the Egyptians, they target the Qataris, they target, you know, they get fixated on these different groups that do things, like the Qataris and their relationship with Hamas. I'm not saying these are good things and so on, but I think it's secondary or tertiary. The key thing is the American policy. So let me explain what I mean by that. Right now, Iran activated the Houthis against global shipping, which has cut shipping through the Suez Canal down to a trickle. The Suez Canal dues are a major the major source of revenue for the Egyptian state, major source of revenue. So Egypt is the power hardest hit by the Houthi attack on international shipping. American policy says that the way to stop the Houthi attacks against international shipping is to get a ceasefire in Gaza. So do you think if you're Sisi, and that's American policy, and you have no way of, you and I, Alex, we would think the way to get a ceasefire in Gaza is to put maximum pressure on Iran. That's from Sisi's point of view, that's a theoretical position of talking heads in Washington. The people that he actually has to deal with, the American administration, they're saying ceasefire in Gaza. So they're going to do everything they can to try to push the Israelis towards ceasefire in Gaza.
I mean, yes, but you'd think that there are things the Egyptians could do. For instance, they could publicly say that we're going to assist the Saudis in dealing with the Houthis. We're going to send expeditionary forces and planes and troops to help the Saudis deal with the Houthis. Is that something you could, and that is the last question, is that at all any practical, or would you ever see that?
No, not at all, for a hundred different reasons. But the number one reason is that, remember how this administration started. It started by taking the Houthis off the terror list,
yes,
and
condemning
vilifying
MBS.
Mohammed bin Salman,
Yeah.
and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and threatening an arms embargo on Saudi Arabia for being in Yemen. So they're not going to defy America like that. It's not going to happen. That's why I say all roads lead to American policy. If the United States has the right policy on Iran, everyone else won't line up behind us, but they will take positions that will strengthen us.
Well, thank you, Mike, for that extremely informative and fascinating briefing. We appreciate it a great deal. We still have a lot of participants who have stuck with you, so stuck with us. So obviously the audience agrees.
Or they're all asleep.
Yeah.
Wake up! Wake up!
I think, the numbers went up a little. Maybe you're right. No, no, actually, they're all here and asking questions. So it was very interesting. And thank you again. I would encourage folks to follow Mike, to go to the Hudson website and follow Mike, including his podcast with the also brilliant Gadi Taub. Very interesting.
Israel update.
Israel update. Yep. And I guess you can link to it from the Hudson website, right?
I don't know, actually.
Okay. Well, you should be able to.
Find it on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. And also, of course, visit and support the camera website. And both organizations deserve your continuing support. So thanks again, everyone, for attending, and see you next time.